Hilchos Sechirut Perek Yud, Chapter 10, Aleph. Hamalves Chaverei al Hamashkin. When a person gives a loan to a friend, and now the malva takes security in return. Ben shilvo mois, ben shilvo peris. Doesn't matter whether he lent him money or he lent him produce. Ben shemishkene b'shas al v'osei, ben shemishkene achar shilvo. Whether he took the security at the time when he gave the loan or after the loan. Halach is, the malva now becomes a paid watchman. And therefore, if the security that he got was either lost or stolen, he's responsible to pay the value. If the security was lost because of causes beyond the lender's control, for example, let's say it was taken by armed thieves, so then the halacha is yeshava shenenas v'yishalem balamashkin escheva ad pruta achrina. So the lender has to take a shvua that it was lost due to forces beyond his control, and the owner of the security must pay his chayv until the last pruta, because it was stolen from listim mizuyin, which we know a shemer sochar is not a chayv for listim mizuyin. Base kol ha'im l'chaveirei shmor li ve'eshmor lecha as a shmira b'bailim. When a person tells a friend, watch my article for me and I will watch your article for you, so the halach is it's considered as if the owner was employed by the watchman. Shmor li hayom ve'eshmor lecha l'machar hashleni hayom v'ani ashelcha l'machar shmor li hayom v'ashelcha l'machar hashleni hayom ve'eshmor lecha l'machar kuli nasa shemer sachar zeh lezeh. Now, if he tells his friend, you watch today for me and I'll watch tomorrow for you, lend me an article today and I'll lend you tomorrow, watch an article for me today and I will lend you an article tomorrow, or lend an article to me today and I will watch an article for you tomorrow, so then it's considered like a shemer sachar. Gimel, kol ha'umanin shemer sacharin. All craftsmen are considered to be a paid watchman. Whenever a craftsman says, take your article and pay for it, or I've completed it, the owner does not take the article, the craftsman is considered to be a shemer chinam. If, however, the craftsman says, bring money and take your article, it's considered to be a shemer sachar as before. A person gives an article to a craftsman to fix, and the craftsman ruins it. The halacha is the craftsman is chayav to pay for it. Ketzad hasa nosel lecharash shida teva migdal likbeil bahen mas mer ushvare shenosel leise eitzim lases ben shida teva migdal v'nishparachar shnasum v'nisham leidmei shida teva migdal. If a person gives a carpenter a chest or a box or a closet to place a nail into it, and he breaks the article, he has to pay for it. If a person gives a carpenter the wood to make a chest or a box or a closet, and he breaks them after he completes making them, the carpenter has to pay the employer for the chest, the box, or the closet. The svar is that the craftsman does not acquire a share in the increase in the value of the article. If a person gives craftsman's wool to dye, and the vat which he dyes, it boils until the water evaporates, and he destroyed the wool, the dyer must reimburse the owner of the wool. Tzvo kor nasana lay the tzvo adam tzvo shachar tzvo adam. Nasan eitzim b'choresh lasis men kitsa nasa no ve'osa kitsa rali safsol. So im hashavach yasal eitzah nizim balak liyas eitzah v'im eitzah yisrael hashavach nizim liyas hashavach b'vat. The dyer dyed the wool unattractively. The owner asked him to dye it red, and he dyed it black. He asked him to dye it black, he dyed it red. Or he gave wood to a carpenter to make an attractive chair, and he made a poor chair red. The halacha is that if the increase in the value of the article exceeds the cost, all the owner of the article is required to pay is the cost. If the cost exceeds the increase in the value of the article, all the owner of the article is required to pay is the increase in the value of the article. The owner of the article says, I do not desire this, I don't want it. I would rather that he give me the value of the wool, the value of the wood. So the halacha is, we don't listen. Craftsman says, here is the cost of the wool or the wood. He doesn't listen to this. As far as the craftsman does not acquire a share in the increase of the value of the article. Hey, person brings raw material to professional and he ruins them. Or nothing chemical and after so pass the palim. Behema the tabak vinipa. So a guy brings raw material to professional and he ruins them. So we're saying the halacha is that the professional is chayav to reimburse the owner for their value because he's like a shemer soaker. For example, a person gave wheat to a miller to grind and he did not soak it. The flour came out as bran and coarse. Or a person gave a flour to a baker and he made bread that crumbles. Or a person brought an animal to shechta and he shechted it not okay. So he has to pay for it. Therefore, if an expert shechted an animal without charge and he caused it to be unacceptable, he's not chayav to pay for it. If he's not an expert, even if he works without charge, he's required to pay for it. When a person shows a coin to a money changer and he says it's good, and it's discovered that it's unacceptable, if he charged for his services, he's obligated to pay, though he's an expert and does not require further training. Now, if he did not charge, he is not chayav, provided he's an expert and does not require further training. Now, if he's not an expert, he has to reimburse the questionnaire even when he does not charge for his services. As far as this applies when the questionnaire tells the money changer, I'm relying on you. Or it's obvious from the situation that he's relying on the opinion, not seeking other advice. When a shechs an animal without charge, makes it unfit, the money changer said that the coin was acceptable and it was not, or in a similar situation, the person who caused the damage must supply the proof that he's an expert. If he cannot supply proof, he has to pay. Now, in a place where it's the minig for a person who plants trees to receive half of the increase in value, and for the owner of the land to receive half the increase in value, if he planted trees in a portion of the land that increased the value, but planted other trees in another portion of the land that caused the loss, we calculate the half of the profit that is due to the planter and deduct the entire loss he caused. Now, even if he made a tanai, if he causes a loss in a certain portion of the land, he will not receive any profit of it. All his words are not listened to, and only the loss he actually causes is deducted from his profit. Because it's only a asmachta. When a person who plants trees now terminates his relationship with the owner before reaping the crop, he bears the responsibility for his actions. For example, the person who plants receives half of the profits, and the owner of the land the other half. If the person who planted the trees caused the land to increase in value and then wished to terminate his relationship with the owner, forcing the owner to employ a sharecropper. The owner of the land can employ the sharecropper. Even so, the owner of the land receives half of the profits. He didn't suffer a loss. Now, the sharecropper receives a third, and the remaining 6 is given to the person who planted the trees. Since he willingly terminates his relationship, he suffers the consequences. With regards to the person who plants trees on behalf of all the members of the city who caused the loss. For example, that the village who renders an animal unacceptable for consumption. Or a person who is a bloodletter who caused an injury. So let's say a scribe who made a mistake in legal documents. Or a teacher was negligent, or the children did not teach them, or taught them with a mistake. Or any other professional who made a mistake and cannot be corrected. They may be removed from the position without warning. For the warning for them to perform their work carefully is self-evident. They must faithfully apply themselves to the tasks, for they were appointed by the community to discharge their responsibility. Hilchos Sechirut Perek Yud Aleph, chapter Yud 11. Aleph, mitzvah aseh to schar socher bezmani. It's a mitzvah aseh to pay a worker's wage on time. Shneimar b'yomei titin schari. On the day it is due, pay him his wage. If an employer delays payment, he is over a negative commandment. Do not let the sun set without receiving it. Do not let the sun set without him receiving it. You don't get malchus because he has to pay. Supplies to the wage of a person, or the fee for hiring an animal or a keli. In all these instances, one is obligated to make payment when due. If one delays the payment, he's over on a leisasi. The obligation to pay a wage when due applies to a ger teshuv, but one does not transgress a negative commandment if one delays paying him. When a person withholds the payment of a worker's wage, so if he takes his soul from him, because of it, he puts his life in his hand. And he violates 4 warnings and a positive commandment. He transgresses the commandment to not oppress a friend, and do not steal, do not hold overnight the wage of a worker, not allow the sunset before paying him, and also to pay him on time. What are workers' wages? When are workers' wages due? A person who is hired to work during the day should collect his wages at a time during the following night. With regard to him, it says, do not hold the wage of a worker in your possession overnight until the morning. Person who is hired to work during the night should collect the wages at a time throughout the following day. And it says, concerning him, on the day it's due, pay him his wage. Person who is hired to work several hours during the day should collect his wage during the remainder of the day. Person who is hired to work several hours during the night should collect his wage during the remainder of the night. When a person is hired for a week, a month, a year, or 7-year period, if he leaves his work during the day, he should collect his wage during the remainder of the day. If he leaves his work during the night, he should collect the wage during the remainder of the night. A person gives his garment to a tailor, and the tailor completes and notifies him. The owner does not transgress the commandment as long as the garment is in possession of the tailor, even if he delays paying him for 10 days. The son of Bechatzayim gives shakalo chamo al over mishum bal talin. Shakablan is kiskir to highlight in his money. The tailor returned in the middle of the day. Once the sun sets, the employer transgresses the commandment for holding the worker wage past its due date. For contracting work is governed by the same halachas as hired labor. The craftsman must be paid his wage when it's due. The person tells his friend, go and hire workers for me. Now, and the shliach tells them the employer is responsible for your wages. So both of them do not transgress the isser against delaying payment of the worker's wages. The owner is not chai because he didn't hire them. And the shliach is also not chai because he did not benefit from the worker's activity. If he did not say to them the employer is responsible for your wages, the shliach is considered to transgress the issue. The employer does not transgress the Isra unless the worker demanded payment and he did not give it to him. If, however, the worker did not demand payment he demanded payment and the employer did not have the money to pay him, or he directed the worker to another person who accepted the responsibility of paying him, the employer is not chayiv. Hey, now, when a person delays payment of a worker's wage until after the due date, he's chayiv to pay him immediately, even though he already violated. Every second he doesn't pay, he's over the rabbinic command. Not tell your friend, go return for tomorrow, we'll pay. Vav. Kol sokar sheshchari be'edim mitfol bezman remember balabais nesadet chasarcha ve'asokar meledet klum tikna chacham shishav asokar beged eschevitz v'yitlok edin kol nishma v'netum neisha balabais told be'pe'elo v'zah asokar neisad nafsh lezeh. Whenever a worker who was hired in the presence of witnesses demands payment from his employer, at the time the owner claims to have paid the wage and the worker claims not to have received it, the chacham metakana while holding a the worker should have to take a shua that he did not receive payment. He can then collect it according to the laws governing all those who take oaths and then collect the due. The svara is that the employer is busy managing his workers and the worker is pinning his soul on his wage. And the halacha is even if he is a minor. He swears and he takes the money. That's all with Edom. Now, the employer hired the workers without witnessing and observing, since the employer could have said, and I never hired you, so we accept the claim. He says, I hired and I paid you. So now the employer makes a shua hesses if he denies owning anything of the worker. If you had one aid, doesn't help. If the worker demands payment after the day which the wage is due, so he has to mitzvah. The worker proves that he has been continuously demanding payment. He may take a shua and collect his wage on the day on which he demands payment. The worker performed labor for the employer on Monday until evening. The time he should be paid is Monday night. Tuesday he can no longer take a shua and collect his wage. If he brings witnesses who testify they demanded his wage throughout Monday, he may take an oath and collect his wage throughout the day on Tuesday. But from Tuesday onwards, he's not allowed to. If he has witnesses who testify that he has demanded his wage until Thursday, he may take a shvua to collect his wage throughout the day on Thursday. Well, there's a difference between the employer and the worker with regards to the wage promise. The employer says, I promised him, let's say, 2 zuz. And the worker says, you promised me 3. So, halacha is, the chacham did not entitle the worker to support his claim with an oath. Instead, we say, mitzvah if the worker did not prove his claim, even though the employer already gave him 2 zuz, he admits owning him or says, here's your money, the employer has to take an oath holding on the Gittas, and this was Menachachamim, so the worker will not depart with an unsatisfied soul. When do we say this? When the employer hired the worker in the presence of witnesses who do not know the wage they agreed on. Also, the worker demanded his wage on time. If, however, the employer hired the worker without this being observed by witnesses, or the worker demanded payment after the time for payment passed, the employer is required to take a shvus hesses, and he agreed to pay him no more than he already gave him, or no more than he admits to owe him and told him that he was willing to pay us. is true with regard to all their claims. A person gives a garment to a tailor to mend, and a difference of opinion arises concerning the payment due to the tailor. The tailor says, "You promised me 2," the owner says, "I promised you 1." So the halacha is Hari Uman. So again, as long as the garment is in the possession of the tailor, he'll be able to claim that he purchased it. The tailor is given the opportunity to take an oath while holding out the schevit to collect that amount. You may claim up to the amount of the article's worth of his wage. Once the garment departed from his possession, or in a situation when he would not presume that the owner, and he cannot claim that he purchased the garment, let me say a prisoner wishes to take from their friend has to prove his claim. If he does not prove his claim, the owner of the garment is required to take a shua sessus. If he denies owing the tailor anything more than he paid him, or he admits a portion of the tailor's claim, then the halachas with regards to other claims. Such a situation is not governed by a special leniency granted to him regarding the laws of employing worker. When a worker comes to take an oath, we do not deal severely with him, nor is he required to take an oath with regards to the others based on Gilul Shvuah. Instead, he takes an oath that he did not receive payment and collects his due. We're not lenient with other people who come to take oaths, with the exception of a worker. In this case, we are lenient and invite him to take an oath, saying, "Do not cause yourself exasperation, take the oath and collect your due." Even when the wage is only a pruta, if the owner claims that they have paid him already, he should collect it after taking an oath. Similarly, whenever a person takes an oath and collects his due, even if he claims only 1 pruta, he may collect it unless he takes an oath resembling Kain Shaltera.
Hilchos Sechirut Perek Yud Beis Aleph Hapeilim Shein Eisim Bedavar Shegdulim Min Haaretz V'Adai L'Nimra Melachtan Bein Betalish Bein Mechumer V'Yu Ma'asin Gemir Sam Lacha Chayishan Ala Balabais Mitzvah Sheniach Eison When workers are performing work with produce that grows from the earth, but the work required for it has not been completed, and their actions bring the work to its completion, the employer is commanded to allow them to eat from the produce which they are working. This applies whether they are working with produce that has been harvested or produce that is still attached to the ground. Shinemar, as it says, Kisami Bekerem Reyacha, the gamer, because of Kisami Bekomas Reyacha. It says, when you enter the vineyard of your friend, you may eat grapes as you desire. When you enter the standing grain belonging to your friend, you may break off stalks by hand. So we learn that these psukim are speaking solely about a paid worker. Now, the owner of the produce did not hire him. What right does the person have to enter his friend's vineyard or standing grain without his permission? The pshat is that when you enter the domain of your employer for work, you may eat it. What are the differences in the application of the mitzvah between a person who performs work with produce that has been reaped and the one who works with produce that is still attached to the ground? Person who performs work with produce that has been reaped may partake of the produce as long as the work is necessary for it has not been completed. Once the work necessary for it has been completed, he may not eat it. If a person who performs the work with produce that is still attached to the ground, a harvester of grapes or grain, may not partake of the produce until he has completed his work. For example, a person harvests grapes and puts them in Okay, if you like shifter, into the already. A person who puts them into a large basket, when the basket is filled, he's taken away and emptied to another. So say that the worker may eat only when the basket has been filled. But the say that the workers may eat while they are working from one road to another, and while they're returning from vat to vat. So they will not neglect their work to sit down and eat. Instead, they were granted permission to eat while they're performing their work, so do not neglect it. When a person neglects his work and eats when he has not completed his work, he is over, as it says, do not lift a sickle against your friend standing in. To explain that as long as the worker is involved in reaping, he should not lift a sickle in order to partake of the produce himself. Or who carries his own produce for which he had worked, or takes more than he can eat himself and gives to others, is over melchach in that place. Violation of these two isur is not punishable by malchus, because a person who ate them when one should have not took a produce home is chayav to pay. Hachelev, a person who milks an animal. V'amechabitz, a person who makes butter. V'amegabit, a person who makes cheese. In eichel nishing to the karka, they are not allowed to partake of it because this is not considered product of earth. Hamadakish b'btzalim m'shumin, person who holds around onion heads or garlic heads. Even though you remove small ones, he may not partake of them because this activity does not constitute a completion of the task. Needless to say, watchmen over gardens, orchards, or fields where any crops are grown, the cucumber gardens or gourd gardens, will may not partake of the produce growing there at all. Hey, they should person who separates dates and figs that have already been harvested and are stuck together may not partake of them, for the work that obligates the performance of the mitzvah has been completed. Person who works with wheat after they have been dyed, the person who hired to remove pebbles from grain to sift kernels or to dry them, may partake of them, for the work that obligates the performance of the mitzvah challah has not been completed. Whenever a person needs dough, bows, baths, loaves, or bakes, he may not partake of the food because the work that obligates the performance of the mitzvah challah has been completed. And a worker may not partake of produce except when the work that obligates the performance of the mitzvah or ma'aser challah has not been completed. If the cakes of figs belonging to a person becomes broken up, his barrels of wine become open, or his gourds become cut, or he hires workers to tend to the produce that he may not partake of, they may not partake of it, for the work necessary for them has been completed, and they have become obligated to ma'aser. Then indeed they are tevel. If however the owner did not notify the workers, he must tithe the produce and allow them to partake. They cannot eat hectares, it says, your friend's vineyard. When a person hires workers to work with produce that is not invited, they may not partake of it. But if he did not inform them that it's not invited, pay them he may redeem them, must redeem them and allow them to partake of it. Whoever workers who reap, thresh, winnow, separate unwanted matters for food, harvest olives or grapes, shred grapes, or perform any work tasks as nature are granted the right to partake of the produce which they are working. Watchmen for vast grains, heaps, and any produce that has been separated for the bearer for which the work that obligates has not been completed, may partake of the produce because of the local convention. They're not granted this privilege according to their nice, because a watchman is not considered to be the one who performs that action. I will also be one of maybe other women if a person works with the limbs, whether with the hands or the feet or the shoulders, he is entitled to partake of the produce according to A worker is working with figs may not partake of grapes. A person who's working with grapes may not partake of figs. When you enter the vineyard of your friend, you may eat grapes. Person who's working with one vine may not eat of another vine. Nor may take of grapes together with other food. You should not partake of them together with the bread or salt. Again, so he may not partake of grapes together with other food. He should not partake of them together with bread or salt. If, however, the worker set a limit concerning the quantity that he may eat the produce with salt, with bread, or with any other food. Aser, the pale lamutz ba'novim, shenem rachal ta'novim. Person is forbidden. It's forbidden for a worker to suck the juice from grapes, as the pasuk says, and you shall eat grapes. Neither the worker's son nor his wife may roast the kernels of grain in fire for him. You may eat grapes so you desire. Another commission has to be the grapes the way it is. Yet Aleph. Also, it's forbidden for a worker to eat like a crazy amount of produce which she is working. As it says, you may eat as you desire to your satisfaction. It's permitted, however, for him to delay eating until he reaches the place of higher quality grapes to eat there. A worker may even eat a dinner's worth of cucumbers or dates, even though he was hired to work only for a silver mo. Like it says, allowed in the son of the after you say so is a festival fun of. Teach a person not to be a glutton, so that he will not be fired by his employer. And Mishamra Arbor Chomisharim is like Malik crazy and Mahas Menalecho with clocks of ox of Cheshbon. Person is guarding 4 or 5 grapes, grain heaps. Should not eat as fill. He should not eat as fill from only one of them. Instead, he should eat an equal amount from each one. Workers who have not worked both length and the other way, and the vat may eat grapes but not drink wine. At the time they are still working solely with the grapes. But they have treaded in the vat and walked both lengthwise. They may eat grapes and drink the grape juice, for they are working with both the grapes and the wine. This when a worker says, give my wife and my children what I would eat, or I will give a small amount of what I have taken to eat for my wife and my children, he is not given this prerogative. The Zatir has granted his rights only to a worker himself. Even when a Nazar, even a Nazar says this, we don't listen. When a worker, his wife and his children and his slaves were all employed to work with produce, and the worker made it deny that they, neither he or nor the members of the household, should not partake of the produce, they're not allowed to. When they are past the maturity, because they're intellectually mature, responsible for the decision, and they're muffled, and they're meichel. However, the children are minors, their father cannot pledge they will not eat, for they're not eating from his property or from the employer grants them, but rather they're eating what Hashem granted them.